Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's story, a homeowner association demands that a farmer sells his land and leaves his property immediately. When he refuses, the terrible HOA pressures him with a semi-truck and destroys his land. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. I never thought these Western ways would come to my area in the Philippines, but I had an experience where an HOA was formed and the woman running it was completely corrupt and wanted nothing more than to cause problems for me. So I make a living working on the same farm that has been in my family for generations. It's not much, but I'm able to grow crops and make enough so that I can survive. There are many areas in the country that are poorer, so I find myself fortunate to be in a decent situation. There used to be more farms around me, but slowly the area has been getting sold off and the land turned into a new subdivision, full of homes and people that are richer than most that used to live here. There was a woman in charge of the HOA for the subdivision that I will call Karen for this story. She was angry that I had not agreed to sell my land and let more homes be built on it. Even with the money I would have gotten, I had nowhere else to go and nothing else I knew how to do for work. The farm was my life and my legacy. It was worth more than what Karen wanted. I refused to give her the land and tried to explain my reasoning to her. She acted as if I was intentionally not selling it to spite her or try to get her to hand over even more money. Nothing I said mattered because she was just believing what was in her head. I did not mind her hating me, but what I did mind was one day waking up to see that she had parked a large semi-truck right on my property. It blocked all access in and out of the farm, making my life extremely difficult. When I asked her to move it, she said that it would be moved as soon as I showed her the papers that I sold the land to the HOA. I refused and she screamed at me that I could not be a farmer anymore and this was no longer a place for me, telling me to move to a poorer area if I wanted to grow crops. Speaking of which, I noticed that other HOA members had shown up and started destroying my crops and fences. So then I went to the police, but they told me that unless I had proof it was my word against many and I would probably not end up winning. They would also take down my complaint though. I managed to find some cameras for sale that I could set up for the next time they showed up on my property. I also used an area of fence they destroyed to create a new access point for my farm. The police said they didn't have anything big enough to remove a semi-truck and forcing Karen could take some time. Then they came back again and destroyed more of my farm, with me now getting video evidence of it. Also, Karen yelling and telling me that she wanted me to leave and sell the farm. I even managed to get her admitting that the truck was hers and on camera as well. I went back to the police with the video proof and told them that I wanted to file an official report and have charges pressed against the HOA for damaging my property and parking the truck on it. During the legal fight with Karen, many people were able to see that she was not stable at all and would start screaming and fighting the moment something she didn't like was said. Especially when she was told that the HOA would have to give me money because of the damage they had done. With her yelling that I was a dirty farmer and the land would be better used for more homes instead. She was verbally abusive in court, which made it easier for a judge to find her guilty of harassment, vandalism and trespassing. And by the way, I've read stories in America where harassment is not punished very harshly, however here it is considered a criminal offense, and if severe enough you can go to jail for it. And that was exactly the future that awaited Karen, with her being sentenced to 2 years in prison for her actions. On top of that, the HOA needing to give me money, and the others that helped her vandalize and destroy my property were also getting criminally charged, but not as severely as Karen. However, things did not stop there because there was still an HOA and more about Karen being uncovered. Since they had to give me money, it meant that now their finances were being looked at by the government too. It turned out that the money being collected by the members was not going into an account but instead just being taken by Karen and her husband themselves. They wanted the HOA money for themselves to buy expensive things and live a high-class lifestyle, wanting to be rich while really just stealing from people. I was not involved in this, but I can imagine that the theft was gonna cause her prison sentence to be even longer, as well as her husband now getting arrested as well. Their home and things being sold off to pay not only me back, but the HOA members they stole from as well. Now people living in the subdivision did not trust the HOA, even with Karen no longer part of it and safely in prison. After they got their money back, people demanded to no longer be members of this HOA, either in fear of money being stolen again or just trust being broken beyond repair. I don't know how many members they had left at the end, but I cannot imagine many, if any. The rest of the HOA decided to shut it down before they lost money just running it without anybody being members. I still despised all the people involved in the HOA that came to my farm and helped in harassing me. Now with my crops replanted, the fence rebuilt and the semi-truck gone, I can continue just farming. None of them tried to come back to bother me again. Despite living next to it, I'm still very separate from the subdivision of homes. They stay out of my business and I stay out of theirs. No matter what, I don't think I'll ever feel 100% comfortable again with these houses there. I don't want to worry about people wanting me to sell the farm again, or even what will happen with the next generation of my family. Having a farm means a source of income and food on the table. I don't mean to sound dramatic, but it could mean the difference to somebody like me between life and death. And having that attempted to be taken away from me was scarier than I could ever explain. I hope that Karen has a horrible time and gets the punishment she deserves in prison. Here, we don't have as many HOAs as in America, so I really hope that the government punishing them harshly will cause them to either do things in a way beneficial to the community or just not exist at all. And yeah, Ripe Stars, by the way, small update, I told you a while ago that actually an HOA is also starting up here in my neighborhood in Thailand. However, so far there have only been 2 meetings and we have been to one of them because we were traveling previously, and the meeting was actually not too bad. They discussed some points that I agreed with that needed discussing, and maybe, just maybe, this is a good HOA, but of course I will keep you updated. Until they fine me for my motorcycle or something like that, because that is when hell begins. Either way, the next one is a malicious compliance story. In the late 90s of the last century, while I was still working at the international organization, things at the office deteriorated a bit. People were rotating in and out of the office and my manager was one of them. The specimen that became my new manager was what my grandma, with a knowing glance, would call special. Entitled and superior, according to himself, let's call him Frank. We did wholeheartedly agree on one thing though, the dislike we had for each other. One of the tasks I had assumed was head of protocol for my boss, the High Commissioner HC. This basically means that I had to ensure that he was treated according to his station, with all rights and privileges awarded to him as an international dignitary. Oh, and by the way, I had to look solemn. So our office was working closely together with a number of NGOs on several issues. We would make policy and they would implement it on the ground with projects, etc. One of the NGOs was organizing a conference where we would connect policymakers with international legal experts. The objective being, international experts don't bite, don't try to invent the wheel, call them. The director of said NGO visited us often and we got along like a house on fire. Much to the annoyance of Frank, who thought I didn't know my station. So when HC asked whether I could assist with the organization, HC agreed immediately. I had built up somewhat of a reputation in that field, so it wasn't considered strange. So far so good. I helped arranging the hotel, drivers, interpreters, liaised with various ministries and experts. The NGO got used to calling me all hours, weekdays and weekends to check or discuss things. I did not mind, I worked my proverbial A off and we had rented conference rooms in a 5-star hotel in Vienna. The police would supply security, the airport would receive the guests and all people would be staying in the same hotel. The only thing was, due to agenda restraints of various participants, the conference would start on Friday and end on Monday. Everybody assumed, me included, that I would be there. There was one detail I had forgotten though, to ask Frank's permission. I needed to have a form signed to authorize my travel, otherwise I wouldn't get paid for working, much less travel there. On a Monday morning, I walked into Frank's office and dropped the blank authorization form on his desk with as neutral a look as possible, trying to pass it off as an annoying detail. I said, "Sir, concerning the conference, could you sign the document for approval? I know it's a bother, but you know, please?" He picked it up, looked at it, and holding it, checked something on his computer. "This conference is not organized by us, but by the NGO?" "Correct, the boss is a guest. So the rooms and travel are paid for by the NGO?" "Correct. So you'll be a guest. You may go. I'll grant you the Friday and Monday as paid leave, and nothing else." He filled in the authorization form, signed it, gave it to me, and gave this little wave that you use towards servants. "That'll be all." You have to be effing kidding me. I stood up, kept my jaws as clenched as my fists and walked out of there. Absolutely fuming. Getting back to my office, I was met with one of the policy advisors who wanted to discuss the details of one of the meetings. I think I radiated an air of dejection because he asked me what was wrong and I told him, "You cannot accept that." I shrugged. "There's nothing much I can do. He is my manager." As he stood up, he said, "Well, we will see about that." I then went about my day and managed to push it to the back of my mind. A few days later, I was called into the HC's office, sitting behind his desk with papers piled up in great stacks. He never learned computer. He was talking with the director of the NGO, who was sitting opposite of him. They seemed very relaxed. HC looked at me and smiled. "Ah, have a seat. I gather you'll be working with us in your spare time, huh?" I nodded. "Yeah, Frank didn't give me authorization." "Well, correct, and I will not change one iota as he is your manager. I have to respect his decisions regarding his own staff. Otherwise I will undermine his authority and I cannot have that. I'm sorry, but my hands are tied. The authorization stays unchanged. It's a bit of a conundrum really, as I gather you're working day and night on this." I nodded again and wondered why they called me in to state the bleeding obvious. In the silence that followed, the director let out a chuckle and the HC started smiling. He grabbed a form off his desk and looked at it. What followed next was the most astonishing monologue I've ever heard, not because of eloquence, but because of implications. "We had ordered you a plane ticket, but we have just decided that we need you to bring some supplies. So you'll be going with your own car and will be reimbursed a first-class train ticket with sleeping quarters. As the supplies you will have to bring take up some space, we have decided that your room will be upgraded to a suite. Can't have you tripping over everything now, can we? Oh, and I understand it's quite heavy, probably too much for you to carry alone. Would your girlfriend be available that weekend to assist you carrying the supplies? We will reimburse her travel and stay on the same conditions, of course. Furthermore, you will get a per diem for 4 days, and as you will be working during the weekend and 2 days of your leave, your salary will of course be increased. Leave days and Saturday 150% and Sunday 200%. Now where do I sign? Oh, and tell your girlfriend that I'll be looking forward to host her at my table for the first evening." The director now burst out laughing. After a couple of seconds, he composed himself and added, "Oh, and as you're consulting for us as well in those days, we will pay you a consultancy fee as well, of course. Not a large one, but an administrative fee should do." Listening to this, I had to process what that meant. I'd be reimbursed more than an entire month's salary for 4 days' work, but won't Frank protest? I mean, I don't want to get in trouble over this. HC looked at me and tried to look as innocent as possible. "As far as I'm aware, I have completely respected his authorization form, so I'm not undermining his authority in any way. I've just added a new one to it." He continued with a smile that I can only describe as slightly evil. "What we discussed here falls under confidential information. You're not aware of this conversation, and I've forgotten I've signed this document." I nodded. In the environment I worked in, you quickly learn to have no active memory of a lot of things. I stood up, walked to the door, and suddenly something hit me. What supplies do I have to transport? The director randomly picked up a slender folder, marked "Conference" with at most 10 pages, reached out and gave it to me. "Thought you would never ask this. Don't drop it. I understand it's heavy." My girlfriend and I had a lovely time, and as she was from Vienna, she was positively radiating, inviting her friends for coffee or drinks at a 5-star hotel suite. Oh, and Frank? Well, he never found out, and up to this day he thinks he taught me a lesson. And yeah, right for stars, I gotta say, that was one of the more unique malicious compliance stories, and props to OP for getting this done. Absolutely legendary if you ask me. Either way, the next one is an Am I the A-hole story. So me, 32 male, and my wife, Dahlia, female 28, lost our apartment 2 months ago and moved in with my mom temporarily. Or her mom, not sure. Anyway, issues began to arise between Dahlia and mom, and I had to ask my friend Anthony, male 31, to let us move in until I get enough money to rent out. His wife was away visiting family and he agreed, but even there, some issues started to arise. For your information, Dahlia is very shy around Anthony. She grew up in conservative home and so it's understandable, but sometimes it can be a bit much, I admit that. For example, she freaked out when she accidentally drank from his glass, and she also once made a fuss when he passed by the guest room when she was lying down and the door was open. Thankfully, Anthony was super understanding and we were able to talk some of these issues out. Last night, Dahlia was passing the hall and noticed a framed picture of Anthony and his wife kissing hanging on the wall. She told me about it and said it made her uncomfortable. She asked if I could speak to Anthony about it, but he didn't take it well. He gave me a look when I spoke to him and said that this was bonkers because first of all, his wife put it there, and second of all, the picture holds sentimental meaning to him and his wife, and argued that it was not some explicit picture of them, just a normal wedding kiss. We started arguing and he said that it wasn't like it was hanging in the living room wall or a perfectly lit room. I asked him to be a little more considerate because it's not like I asked him to remove it completely, just move it elsewhere, that Dahlia won't reach or keep it off the wall until we leave. He said he was sorry but still refused. I explained how Dahlia was feeling, but he said that again, he was sorry and wouldn't move the picture. We argued some more and he said that it's his house and that I was being pushy and kind of too comfortable to make such a demand and be pushy still. This morning, Dahlia refused to even come out of the room until the picture is moved. Anthony is refusing, which makes it worse. Now I feel like I'm getting stuck between a rock and a hard place. Yes, she might just be overreacting, but I feel like this is not such a big ask for Anthony to decline and turn down, and if it were me, I would go the extra mile to make sure my guests are comfortable. By the way, Anthony has been a friend of mine for 10 years. I wouldn't have asked to move in with him if I didn't have such a strong bond with him. He himself constantly talks about all the things and situations I helped him out with, and we are considered brothers. And yeah, ripe stars, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Is OP the a-hole or not? And I would say, no matter if he's friends with this guy for 10, 20 or 30 years, OP and his wife are definitely acting in an entitled way if you ask me. And if you're the guest, you have no right to ask such things, in my opinion. Anyway, comment number 1 said, you're the a-hole. First your wife had issues with your mom, and now she is having issues with Anthony. It sounds like your wife is the real issue. From your title, I was expecting your hosts to have a semi-nude or nude portrait in the guest room. But no, she's freaking out over a standard wedding kiss pose in the hallway? Please child, you need to hurry and get your own place. I think you're lucky that Anthony didn't ask you to leave immediately. Comment number 2, you're the a-hole. Let me guess, the issues you had staying with your mom had everything to do with your wife being absolutely ridiculous? This is not about being from a conservative home, so what's really going on here? Was she raised in a cult? Is she affiliated with some fringe religious group? Seriously, you're staying in their home and throwing a fit over him kissing his wife in a photo? And your wife is throwing a fit and refusing to leave her room until they take down their perfectly normal wedding photo? Also, your comment about just doing it to keep guests happy is so baffling given the situation. Like, the photo is not the issue here, and it's not the only problem that's already happened. Also, your wife freaked out after accidentally taking a sip of his water. Does this mean that he's also not supposed to drink water in his own home to keep her comfortable? Also, then she got all upset because he had the audacity to walk past the door, which she had left open while she just happened to be sitting on the bed. So he's also not allowed to walk through his home. What else is he not going to be allowed to do in his own house? Breathe? It'd be bad enough if you were just guests that were visiting for a weekend, but this guy was extremely generous to allow the two of you to stay there while you figure out your financial burden. You're not even guests in the traditional sense, you're basically just roommates who are not contributing financially. And this is how you treat him for talking you into his home? What's really going on with your wife? And why are you enabling this atrocious behavior and extreme entitlement? You're letting her continue with her childish tantrum in someone else's home is making you as much of an a-hole as your wife. Though I do wonder if there's an underlying mental illness behind your wife's behavior. You keep this up and you're going to need another place to stay. And I'm sure that your wife will inevitably get you kicked out of the next place and the place after that. And yeah, ripe stars, I would agree with these comments. OP's wife definitely seems like a proper Karen. No offense intended. Anyway, the next one is another revenge story, and it starts like this. I work in a theater, and it's not uncommon for audience members to cheekily try and move into seats they see are empty. On quieter days, it's not a huge issue. However, our unspoken policy is wait until the interval because we have a late seating policy and those seats may have been sold to someone else. Or at the very least, ask. So on this day, a while back, we were fairly full, not to the brim, but enough, and I was supervising. My usher told me a woman moved a few rows forward and was argumentative when asked to move back, which she eventually then did. Now, I don't have a problem with people moving along a few seats in the same row, because it's easy enough for them to shuffle back if they happen to take someone else's seat. However, I draw the line at changing rows, especially when they have just been told no. Well, the lights go down and the woman immediately moves back to the seat she was told she could not have yet. Without her husband, mind you. And so I go up to her and explain our policy, and she flat out refuses to move. She says in a very entitled and dismissive tone, "If someone comes, I will move." Right then, I was now feeling petty and righteous. During late seating, we wait for people for about 10 minutes and then let them in at the least disruptive time in the play. Alas, the seat the woman had taken had not been sold, but I had a plan, for I was on a mission. There was a couple said to be seated in the highest level, in other words the cheap seats that I offered an upgrade to because I could see the woman had trouble walking. My usher escorted them in and I was delighted to hear about the woman trying to tell my usher, a different one to the one she initially interacted with, that she will move when people come. My usher said point blank, "People are coming, you have to move." The woman's husband leaned across, grabbed her and guided her back, looking quite embarrassed. I'm told so, at least. During the interval, I could see her surly pouty face. It was glorious. The irony is, had she asked nicely, I'd been happy to help. And yeah, ripe stars, that is the moral of many stories we read. If you're not a douchebag and treat people with kindness and treat them nicely, you probably get the same response. Either way, the next one is another revenge story. I used to work at a marina when I was in high school that sold gas and allowed people to dock for free if they wanted to. Now, one day a guy comes in on a pretty big boat, comes in and gets a lot of gas, like $400 worth of gas. He comes to the counter to pay and gives me $400 in $100 bills, and I accept them and he goes on his merry way. Fast forward a week or so and I'm told by my boss that the bills he paid in were all counterfeit bills. Unfortunately, as he paid in cash, we had no way of tracking him down, so we think that he just got away with stealing $400 worth of gas. That is until this idiot comes back after about a month and a half thinking he got away with stealing the gas. When he comes back in, I recognize the guy and tell my coworker to call the police right away. However, I knew that this guy would just leave if I let on that I had recognized him, and we had discovered his plot to get free gas, so I decided to pretend that I don't recognize him. Luckily for me, this guy asks to dock the boat for an hour or so on our dock, and I tell it's not a problem. Now, it's policy to get the name and phone number of customers using free dockage, as well as asking that they leave their keys in the boat so that we can move the boat to a different dock if needed. He complies to all of the rules and leaves his boat, and he leaves his keys with me. After probably about 15 minutes of waiting, the police show up on the dock and ask my boss where the guy is. My boss tells them he just left his boat, but we have his number and can get him to come back to the boat, and he then instructs me to do just that. At this point, I was pissed at this dude for making me look dumb for basically losing $400, so I call and tell him, "Hey, this is me from Marina. It seems as though there is an issue with your engine and it seems to be smoking." For those that don't know boats that well, engines are very expensive, and this one in particular was a 350 horsepower Yamaha engine, which is top of the line, so that man got back to that boat in record time. When he got back to the boat, the look on his face when he saw two cops waiting for him was priceless. He tried to play it off and act like he had done nothing wrong, and he didn't know why the police were there, but that was short-lived as they arrested him and told him why he was being arrested. It turns out the guy had almost $2,000 in counterfeit $100 bills on him. And yeah, ripe stars, make sure if you are stupid enough to pay with fake bills, then at least don't act like a douchebag and draw suspicion on you. What a stupid entitled person. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.